Right, hi there. What we got here then? This is the lobby to me building, which is on the friendly multiplayer survival server. I'm in creative mode now, just for the purposes of this video. Um, what I've got is a lobby where players can come along and collect a lot of resources, including the mob spawner, largely based off the Monkey Farms design. And adjoining that, I've built an enchanting room, so after they've been on the mob spawner and collected experience, they can then take the equipment under here and enchant it. Now, depending on how long they've spent on the mob spawner collecting experience, will depend how much experience they've got to invest in the enchant. So I've built this contraption, which is an enchanting table, and this is what I'm going to call my power slider of buttons. Now, as I've been playing with the redstone, anywhere I can use a button over a switch, I will, because I just love the buttons over the switches. So what we've got here is, if we press one button at one end, we've got maximum bookcases. The button at the other end, minimum bookcases, and it slides along the scale, so you can find something what you like. I've quite possibly put too many steps in here, but it was a showcase to how the contraption works. And what I'm going to do now is move over to display server, just to show you a stripped down version of this. Hi there, welcome to my private server. Now I've recreated the machine in its bare bones just to show you how it works. And as you can see, it's divided into three major parts. You've got the input, which is the button power slider. So here the stone cobbling represents the fake flow. You've got the middle part, which is the main guts of the machine. Now, depending on what button you press, this part will decide how many of the outputs are activated. And lastly, you have the output section, which in the demonstration that I showed you was bookcases attached to sticky pistons, and this was done in blocks. But you could use whatever you feel like. There's a few other applications I've thought of, but I'll keep them for another video. So there's the beast. How does it work? Right then, the principle of the whole thing is that redstone power will only travel 15 squares from its power source. Now, in normal circumstances, this serves to be a colossal pain in the bum, but here it's the basis of how the whole thing works. So you see, if you press the first button, lights up 4 relays. Press the second button, lights up 5 relays. And the reason for that is the button powers the block powers the redstone underneath. The redstone travels 15 squares, so if you press this button, the redstone will be powered one block further than if you press this button. So if you press this and you count 15, including the one below, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So that's this one here, and you knock that off, and that's good. I put a marker there just to help us out. So if you delete these and you put a relay there, what you'll see is if you press the second button, that relay lights up. If you press the first button, it doesn't. And now this is the basis of how the whole thing works. Now what you want to do is firstly decide how many steps you want on the scale. So including minimum and maximum, let's say we want 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. I like to put the buttons on these lapis lazuli blocks because they just look quite nice, and I don't know any other use for lapis lazuli. So 0, that doesn't light. Number 2, that does light. So what we want to do from number 2 is count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because there's 5 extra buttons, and put that many relays down, but we want to do it in a staggered way like this. And the reason for that is that what we're basically going to build are RS no latches, and using CMB's design of latch, which is a lot more compact than the design that I was using to start with. You can put them one row wide, as long as you leave a gap, they'll not cross talk with each other, and they are done like this. Basically, if you have a relay, and then you have yourself a block, and then on that block you put a torch, and then that torch powers a relay, and then that relay goes into a block just like that. And then that block has a redstone on the top, which goes into a block which has a torch. And now how the whole thing works is, this is it in its unpowered state, if that's how you like. The power will come along, power this relay, which will power this block, which will turn this lamp off, which will turn that off, which will turn that off, which will mean this block is then unpowered, which allows this lamp to come on. If we put some redstone on the top of here, then this comes on, that powers on, and that locks the whole system in place then. So this light turns off, that light turns on, and the only way to reverse that is then to power this dust, and that's the basis of the whole latch. Now there are 2 other blocks, a one there and a one there. That's not an essential part of the system, but it does come in very useful for this build, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So what I'm going to do, just to save a bit of time, is to make this array on the other 5 relays, and I'll be back in a moment. Right then, so we can see here I've completed building the latches onto all of the relays, and I've also added this extra bit of structure to the back, which I'll explain in a moment. So as I said earlier, the power will come along, travel around this latch and lock it in place. And if I demonstrate that by powering just some of these, you can see the ones which are powered are now unpowered along the bottom row, but powered along the top, and the ones where the power haven't reached are still powered along the bottom row, but unpowered along the top. Now the only way to reset these, apart from manual intervention like such, is to power this redstone, and the way we're going to do that is to power these blocks above it, and that's where these 2 blocks come into that we built earlier. So what we want is to put relays into the back of each of these blocks, and this is also where the first button comes into play. Up until this point the first button has done nothing, and so what you want to do is to put relays. Now these relays can actually be placed anywhere between the first switch and the last button, as long as the first button only powers these relays, and every button afterwards also powers them 2 relays and the buttons they're supposed to power. So in the model which I showed you to start with, there was only 1 relay coming off, and then I then split it further round. That was for space reasons, but this is a lot more symmetrical if you do it this way. So from here you want to power all of these. 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So hopefully on this build the power will travel all the way along. If you've got a much bigger build with more switches, what you want to do then is to put another relay in here. Now ordinarily you need to set these to 2 ticks, but if you put a relay in here, because you've got a lot of switches, then you leave that at 1 tick, because that 1 tick and that 1 tick will add up to 2 ticks. And what is vitally important is that all your relays on the ground floor, if that's what you want to call it, are all set to maximum. Because what this does is allow the bookcase movement to be a lot less jerky, and I'll demonstrate that further down the line. So what happens is every button that's pressed, power comes along to these reset lines. Every button apart from the first will power the reset line, and then at least one other relay. So if we press this, hopefully what you'll see is in the distance, I can get a darling shot there. We press that and all of the latches reset. We press the first one and 1 lights up. We press the second one, 2 lit up, and etc. You press the end one, they're all lit up, and you press the first one and they're all reset. So that is in essence how the latch is built. So the only thing remaining is to hook this up to an output. Okay then, the output. Now the output is a bit which is sort of entirely down to how you want to use this. The important thing to note is the output actually comes from this block which we power to reset the system, and we can run the output out the back like this. Now it doesn't matter that this block cuts off this redstone, because this relay is powering this block, so that will power this redstone. So if we do that, and I'll just do it for one side just for demonstration purposes. Now hopefully what you will note is that this is in the minimum setting, so all these latches are off, and when these latches are off the outputs are turned on. So what you want, if you want your outputs to be off when the buttons are off, if you want to think of it in that way, what you need to do is set some kind of inverter. However you want to do it, in this case just a simple NOT gate will do the trick. So just to use the same sort of example that I showed in the first instance, all I'm going to do is knock up a little bookcase array. Now what's quite important to note, if you want to do this hidden bookcase mechanism, is only the oak type trees will give you wood of this colour. If, without jokes about the colour of your wood, if you bear in mind that I have made this on the survival server, harvesting a whole lot of the wrong type of trees is nothing but a heartache. So if we go back to the buttons, what you'll see is you press the 0 button, everything is down. You move along a bit, one of them comes up, and a bit more, and a bit more. And that is the basics of the system. For anyone who's interested, I'm just going to explain a little bit more how I've made that work in the setting I showed you to start with. But if you're not interested in that, thanks for watching. Right then, welcome to the final section. Here, hopefully, there's two take-home messages, which are blocks and timing. So we'll see, this is basically the system set up on the minimum setting. If you press the next button, the bookcases come up in a block, and as you call down extra blocks of bookcases, existing bookcases stay where they are, and only the extra ones appear, and they all appear at the same time. Now likewise, if you work your way down the line, the bookcases that are still required stay where they are, and the other ones all disappear at the same time. Right, now this took a little bit of tweaking, but I'll show you how I've achieved it. If we go to the behind the scenes area, hopefully what you'll recognise here is that is the room that has the button array, and this is the main power line that comes from it. That is the first button reset relay, which comes along and then splits in two directions, and then from here to here is the main decoder section. Like I said, it was a bit cramped for space when I built it, which is why it is how it is. Also, the reset lines are the output lines are a bit more ugly than I'd like, because this has all been created on survival mode, which means as anyone who's done convoluted power lines in survival mode will know, it's a lot easier said than done when you're working on soil scaffolding to picture where the lines are gone. So what you want to do is, if we look at the blocks first, so this is the top down view of the room, and you can see all the cylinders here which have the bookcases attached, and instead of powering every bookcase individually, it's been done in blocks. So one output line coming from one of the latches powers 4 blocks along the top, and this line powers 4 blocks there, this line powers 3 blocks there, etc. Now for symmetrical purposes, what I've done is the second button powers this line, which will power 3 along the bottom. The next button along will power 3 along the top. Now this is entirely my own preference, but so is most of this section, to be honest. Once I managed to hook everything up, what I did was measured the line with the longest delay, and then I worked on reworking the output to have a shorter delay. So if I explain what I mean, this line originally had 13 ticks of delay. Now to those of you that don't know, is every block with a torch will cause 1 tick of delay, and 10 ticks make 1 second's delay, so 13 ticks is 1.3 seconds. What I managed to do was to knock out some unnecessary relays and make that reaction time a bit quicker. The downfall to that is that the relays themselves are more redstone efficient. If you're playing on a survival server, it's more efficient to have a redstone, a block, a torch, a redstone than it is to have a whole long line of redstone. It's not by much, it's only by about 30%, but when you have to harvest all this yourself, it soon adds up. But anyhow, what I managed to do was to get the longest line down to 7 ticks, and then I followed each individual line all the way along and adjusted it to add up to 7 ticks. And how I did that was to add a relay and add the extra ticks in. So let's take the line for example. Now this is, let's take this one. So the power comes along here, blah blah blah, this is your output. Now this line drops downwards. What you'll notice is there's an extra block with redstone before this torch, and that's to stop any crazy crosstalk with this reset line. So, but what you have is this torch essentially counts as 1 tick, 2 ticks, 3 ticks. This was added in to make 4 ticks, 5 ticks, 6 ticks, and every one of these relays is a tick per block, which adds 7 ticks per block. And that is essentially how the timings work. If you don't do that, the system will still work, but the presentation of the bookcases will be a lot more higgledy-piggledy. Hopefully it's been quite straightforward. If there's anything I can help explain, or any ideas or suggestions you just want us to do, then please let us know. And thanks for watching.